Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our, I think we're on session number 6 of our webinar series here tonight. We've been doing this Thursdays throughout the month of April and May, and getting into just some different topics, getting an overview for you of several different things that you might come across in your journey of parenting your child with Down syndrome. And not anything super in depth, but enough to give you a little head start on some of this information and get you some tools and resources as you get rolling. Tonight, we are really lucky to have a speech therapist with us. And for those of you that have been on this journey at all, you might know that this is a space where you probably need some extra info. So we're going to welcome Karen Hurst tonight to talk and give kind of a speech therapy overview. And she'll introduce herself in just a moment as well. But we are just so lucky to have you here tonight. Speech is something that I don't think I really thought about for Owen until I was probably in this phase where I probably should have been thinking about it already. So I'm excited for you to give them some front loading information and talk through what this could look like for families and what your job is and how that all works out. And just as a reminder, next week we'll be holding our final session. This will be on the revised and updated AAP health supervision guidelines for people with Down syndrome. This was something that just got updated here last month, and I know we've posted a lot about it. We've been really excited. The last set of guidelines was released in 2011, so these were long overdue if you ask me. So it's pretty exciting to see that updated with some brand new information for parents. So we are very excited to be digging into that a little bit next week with our medical outreach team. They'll be sharing some info about that. So very, very excited here tonight. I will be stopping my screen share here so that I can let Karen get on hers. Karen, here we go. And yes, I'm in no eye makeup mode because allergy season is in full force here in Iowa this week. So I'll turn off my camera here in a moment and we'll introduce Karen. And like she said, you can feel free to type questions into the chat and we'll leave some time at the end for questions that you guys might have. So Karen, welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And we can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you. It is my honor and pleasure to be here tonight. Like Jen mentioned, I'm a speech and language pathologist. I'm here in Chicago where summer has landed in our lap very suddenly. We're up to 90 degrees. So I'm itching like Jen. So we're all experiencing the joy of summer, but I'm sure it's going to go away soon. So because we're supposed to get back down to 60, I think, in the next couple of days. But anyway, I am just honored to be here. I have been in private practice here in Chicago for over 20 years. I work with early intervention as well, all the way up through young adulthood. A large percentage of my caseload is children and young adults with the diagnosis of Down syndrome. So it's been people with the diagnosis of Down syndrome are very special to me. I have a special place in my heart for them. I have seen children, one young lady that I see, I started with her when she's 16 months old and she's now 25. So we have gone from bubbles and crawling on the floor to now she's a global ambassador for Special Olympics. So I help her with her speeches and coaching. So I've seen, a longitudinal kind of observation of how far, what people with a diagnosis of Down syndrome can do. So I'm just so excited to be here with you because you are at the foundation. You are building language for your children. So I put together a little slide presentation. I hope that it's helpful for you. Should you have any questions at all, please feel free to type them into the chat and we will talk about them toward the end of our session. So I will start this off for you and see here. Standard to present. Okay, is everybody seeing that okay? Yes?
I am not seeing it yet.
You're not seeing it? Okay, let me make sure that I am sharing. Hold on. Canva. 1 second.
I think maybe if you go down to your Zoom
Yeah.
tools, do the share screen there,
Yeah,
try that
hold
one.
on 1 second. It's just this. The co-host thing. Let me see here. It always happens when you least want it to, right?
Oh yes, I know you said we were having some issues with Zoom earlier today too. So
hold on 1 second. Here we go. There we go. Okay, let me go here. And can you see it now?
I cannot.
You still can't. Okay, hang on. There it is. Got it. Okay, now you can see it, right?
There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah? Okay.
Oh, what a cutie. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll just add that in.
Let's go back to, okay, there we go. Okay. So for tonight, we're just going to kind of do a speech therapy overview. I'm going to share some insights with you and also some home strategies that you can use at home. And so it is my pleasure again to be here. And let's just kind of get going. So the first thing that I want to do is really support your belief in your child's communication potential, as well as in your ability to help them reach their potential, because you are really, parents have more power than anyone to help their child communicate. That's more power than a speech pathologist, more power than a teacher, more power than anyone. And so I really want to inspire you and help you to know that you have so much influence over your child's communication skills. And that's why it's so wonderful that we get to start with, the littles, because the younger children are, the more receptive they are to learning and to communicating. So my goal is to share information too about how speech and language pathologists can help you and your child. And last but not least, to talk about speech therapy strategies that will work well for you at home. So just to start it out, before we can do anything else, we have to talk about your unique ability or power to help your child communicate. Because you're with your child so many more hours in the day than anyone else, and because you know your child better than anyone else, you have insights into how they communicate. You can take their language acts and interpret them and really encourage them to communicate. So I want you to understand that you really do have so much influence over how your child develops their communication skills and how they communicate. And also, I want you to believe in your child's ability and potential to grow and learn and change and communicate. Your children are going to amaze you. They will amaze you in what they are able to do. But you have to believe that they can do it. You have to have that growth mindset. For years, people would say, oh, we don't expect so-and-so to do very much because, they have a diagnosis of this, or they have this or that. But, research and experience has proven there are no limits for children, that we just need to help every child reach their own potential. So we need to have a growth mindset about how our children can develop rather than a fixed mindset and put limits on what our expectations for them could be. And this is something that I think, even in the education profession, there are still people who have that fixed mindset about children with a variety of diagnoses, including Down syndrome. And we have to help to educate them and to see that the limits really have changed. So I encourage you to have high expectations for yourself as well as for your child. Because, like old Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So the expectations need to be high. They need to be step by step, but they need to be high. Because a child's potential is not limited by their diagnoses. Every child is different, and we don't necessarily want every child to be the same, but we want them to reach their potential. And your child's brain is active and it's plastic. When you hear people talk about neuroplasticity, what they're talking about is the child's brain is kind of like plastic or Play-Doh, in that it can be molded and shaped by the experiences that they have. So really, parents are the architect and builders of their child's brain, which is quite a load to carry, but it is true. We really kind of determine the foundation for our children, because we are their primary caregivers, and the way that we interact and respond to them shapes their development. And learning involves building and strengthening neural pathways in the brain. It's all about making connections and making those connections stronger. It's just like a path. If you can think about, if you're a hiker or even we get lots of snow paths here in Chicago. The more that you walk on the path, the more the path becomes defined. And it's the same way for those neural pathways in the brain. That's why repetition and practice are so important, because the more a child is exposed to something and does something, the more solid that learning becomes, and the easier it is for them to recall information and to use that information when they need it. So how much and how a parent talks with their child during the early years of life really does matter. Why does it matter? Because again, you're laying the foundation for their future learning. And language and communication are the key to learning. Not only are they the key to learning, they're the key to making connections and building relationships. And if you think about it, language and communication are really at the foundation for relationships, learning, play, imagination, problem solving, reading, writing, math, sports, the arts, and I'm sure many more things. But the most important thing in the center is independence. The more that you can communicate, the more you can have control over what happens to you in your life, and really take the initiative on all of the other things that were mentioned in the talk bubbles. So the first thing that we need to do is understand how a child learns to communicate. And this is just a short presentation, so we're not going to be able to go too far in depth with it, but just to give you some background, communication, that word is really the same core word as community. So communication happens within a community. Communication is made up of words and actions. So there's verbal communication, or communication that's spoken, and nonverbal communication, or communication that is conveyed through facial expressions, gestures, body language, those kinds of things. And then communication is between a speaker and a listener. So in order to communicate, we have to have someone speaking or someone communicating and someone receiving that information. And this is something else that I think that sometimes we don't really have a chance to think about, but speech, language, and communication are learned skills. They're not something that you're either born with or you're not. They're something that you learn. You learn to communicate, and they develop in a fairly predictable order. So one skill lays the foundation for the next, and so forth. So you really have to build that solid foundation, which is what is happening for children who are in the early childhood years. And the early skills, again, lay the foundation for later skills. And we first have to understand language before we're able to use it. So your child will always understand more than what they're able to express. So never assume that because they're not saying certain things, they don't understand what you're saying. People get in a lot of trouble like that, saying things around kids and then several months later, it comes back out. They say things that we don't expect them to say. So first comes receptive language or understanding, and then comes expressive language, and that's sharing ideas and information. Speech and language and communication develop step by step. And the seeds of communication and speech and language that you plant today will be harvested in the future. So sometimes it may seem like you're just talking and talking and talking, and you may not see your child responding or expressing the language back. But that doesn't mean that they're not building language. You have to first, it's kind of like putting money in the bank. You have to put it in first, and then the interest compounds, and then later you're able to see the reward. So the seeds that you plant today won't be harvested usually today. It may not be tomorrow or next week or next month, but keep talking, keep explaining, keep exploring, and keep exposing. So after you kind of understand how communication develops, the next step is to kind of recognize some of the myths that are out there, what's true and what's false. And I've just done 4 of these, but this will, if you could please respond in the chat with a T or a F. The only way a child's speech, language, and communication can improve is through speech language therapy. True or false? What do you think? Okay, this is a sharp group. Absolutely right. False. Good. Good, good, good. I did a presentation and posed this question to that group, and they all thought that this statement was true. So I'm happy to see that this group knows that this is false. Speech and language therapy is very beneficial for children, is very beneficial for parents, but it is certainly not magical or mystical or the only way that a child can communicate. In fact, it's really a springboard for that communication rather than the driving force for it. Because if parents really have to take the initiative to carry over those activities at home so that their child will get the maximum benefit. This is another one, true or false. Some children are stubborn and just don't try to talk. Have you heard that one before? Some children are just stubborn and they don't try to talk. True or false? Okay, this group is pretty sharp. You are absolutely right. This is false, but I can't tell you how many times I have heard this statement. And I've even heard it from professionals, thinking that a child is stubborn and not motivated to talk. But what they don't realize is how much effort is involved in talking and how hard our children work in order to talk. So never let anyone tell you that your child is just stubborn and really just doesn't want to talk, because they do. All right, here's another one for you. Chronic ear infections and middle ear fluid are detrimental to speech and language development. Okay, what do you think about that one? Oh boy, oh boy. These are some sharp mamas in this group. Absolutely right. And middle ear infections and middle ear fluid is something that you really need, you'll want to monitor very carefully with your children. It may be as simple as you see a behavior change in them, or they're more restless during the night. Sometimes they'll tug at their ears, sometimes they won't. But middle ear infections, when children have ear infections and ear fluid, their hearing changes. And it's kind of like if you were to put cotton balls in your ear, and that's how they're hearing the language around them. And during the important early childhood years, when the foundation of learning language is taking place, it's very, very difficult for them to acquire skills when they are not hearing properly, even if it's for 2 weeks. You know, when you think about how much time 2 weeks is in a young life, or if it's 2 weeks here and 3 weeks there, you know, the intermittent hearing loss that can be associated with chronic ear infections. So a lot of times doctors may not be as aggressive in wanting to treat ear infections in children, or they'll say, oh, it's just a little fluid. Let's give it a couple months and see what happens. You know, I would encourage you to, you know, read up on this. And if you really want to discuss this further with the doctor, to not be dismissed by, you know, them just saying, oh, it's okay, it's no big deal. It really can be a big deal for your child. And then the last one of these true false questions: parents have more power than anyone to help their child to talk. True or false? True, true, true. All right. Very good. You guys get it. Excellent. Excellent. Perfect. All right. You are absolutely right. True. So you can build and enrich your child's speech, language, and communication through everyday experiences. In fact, everyday experiences are the best way. Rich language comes from things that are free, things that happen every day. Every interaction that you have with your child is an opportunity for language building. Whether you're roughhouse playing, they're in a box, they're dancing, playing with blocks, whatever, you can build language around that. So everyday experiences, cooking, bathing, all of those are opportunities to add language. Talk about what they're doing, what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're tasting. And exposure. You know, exposure to a variety of social situations. I know we've all kind of been locked up for a while with COVID, and our children have kind of missed out on opportunities to get out and socialize. But when you feel it is safe, you know, I would encourage you to take your children everywhere. Take them around family, take them out in the community. There's so much to learn about, so much to see, so much to do. And this is how they're going to build their language base, their thinking skills, as well as their social skills. And repetition and practice paired with language. You know, when you think about everything that you've learned in your life, you've needed to repeat it and practice it. So repetition and practice are also key for language learning. And when you're working with your child or talking with them and they're doing an art project, you can reinforce the same core vocabulary related to their art. Or when you are, when they're building and you're on the floor with them and talking about the blocks, you can just repeat and practice language. That's going to really help them to grow those connections, to understand how things are related to one another, as well as build their vocabulary and their communication skills. And the other thing is reinforcement, encouragement, and celebration. You know, celebrate all the wins, the little wins and the big wins, as well as the effort towards the wins. We are all motivated and encouraged by reinforcement and celebration. So this really helps to bring out those language skills in the little ones. So who can help you on your journey? Speech and language pathologist. So who is, you know, what is a speech and language pathologist? It's a certified and licensed healthcare or educational professional that specializes in identifying, evaluating, and treating language, communication, and feeding disorders. Speech, language, communication, and feeding disorders. So A pediatric speech and language pathologist would be the person that you would be working with, and your children are up through age 4. So up through age 3, they'll be involved in the early intervention program or any private services that you have them involved with. And then in the United States, then after 3, then children go into early childhood programs within the school district, and that's where they receive their services. But they can also receive private services through hospitals and clinics or private practice offices, or people can even come into your home and provide those services. So early intervention is up through the day before their 3rd birthday. Public schools are age 3 through 21, and private services are from birth all the way in through adulthood. So again, we talked a little bit about this. Hearing and middle ear health are extremely important. And with children with the diagnosis of Down syndrome, they are more susceptible to middle ear infections due to the position of their eustachian tube here. And so the fluid or the infection just sits in there, and so it can be more prolonged with that. So you have to really keep an eye on it. And then if you have concerns about your child's hearing, of course, you would talk to your pediatrician first, and then your pediatrician may refer you to an ear, nose, and throat physician or otorhinolaryngologist, and also an audiologist. In the early intervention program, you can have your child's hearing evaluated as part of that program. And then after age 3, you would go privately to your ear, nose, and throat physician, and many of them have audiologists on staff who will evaluate the hearing. So something else that I thought was important to mention is really we have to follow the steps on our child's developmental path. So, with social media and everything, we're so exposed to everyone's highlight reel about what's going on in their family. And sometimes we can look at others and think, well, maybe I should be doing that with my child, or why isn't my child doing that? Or those kinds of things. But really, every child is on their own individual path. And it's important that we take them step by step through their sequence of learning. And one sequence of learning is not better than another, but we really have to follow the steps on our child's path. And then you can, use proven speech therapy strategies at home. And these are strategies that really have been evaluated and validated. They work. So I'm going to share just a few of those with you. The first is interact face-to-face. It's really helpful to make eye contact, smile often, and use a variety of facial expressions with young children. Listen to your child with your eyes as well as your ears. Observe and respond. There's many ways that children communicate. They use their facial expressions, their eye and body movements, gestures, signs, sounds, as well as words. So everyone communicates before they talk. So your child is communicating with you even before they utter their first word. And the way that you respond to that will encourage them to do more communication. Follow your child's lead and interest. Talk about what they are interested in, what they are seeing and hearing and feeling and experiencing. Try to look at the world through their eyes. Speak slowly, clearly, and enthusiastically when you're talking to them. And when they're young, when they're little and their language skills are really building that foundation, you want to start with simple language. You kind of think about it, if you were to go to another country and you did not know the language, how would you learn it? Would you learn it from people who are starting to speak with you in conversation, or would you like someone to speak to you using simple language and speaking slowly and clearly? Take turns during play and communication. Turn taking is the foundation for communication. When we are having a conversation and interacting with each other, we're taking turns. And taking turns during play spills over into taking turns during communication. Encourage hands-on learning and add language to all the different experiences that your child has, because children learn best through experiences, because their five senses give meaning to our words and to their world. So when they are touching and seeing and hearing and tasting and feeling and even moving, we can talk about the proprioceptive sense, the sixth sense. It gives meaning to their world when they are actually able to do firsthand exploring. And then when you add words to that, then that reinforces vocabulary, concepts, learning. And then use a total communication approach. So it's not just about spoken words. Pointing and other gestures are communication. Sign language, I love sign language, and it's really, I use sign language for all children that I work with who are under 3 for sure, because it gives them a visual reference to go along with the language. Because when you think about it, when a word is said, then it's gone. But if you have a sign, you're giving them not only the auditory input, but also the visual input, as well as the motor input. The movement that's associated with the sign helps to really bridge the understanding between what the sign, represents and the actual object, action, or situation. And then also pictures and picture symbols can be very helpful. And at first, when children are young, it's important to focus on important language. So focus on language that's going to be valuable for their daily routine. Make that language a priority for them. They don't necessarily need to know what a zebra is before they would understand what a cup is or what their socks are. So you want to really focus on language that's important for their daily routine first, and then add new language as they demonstrate an understanding and use of the more functional language. And then give your child time to respond. Sometimes children need time to process what has been said and then to formulate how they want to respond. So give your child the gift of time to respond. Say something to them, pause, give them an opportunity to respond. And then if it seems that they need to have it repeated, then repeat it again, or pair it with a gesture or a sign or a picture to help them to understand what you're saying. Emphasize and repeat important words in a variety of situations. As we said before, repetition is necessary for all learning. Point to what you're talking about. Pointing it out makes your message more clear, as well as it causes your child to have attention to what you're talking about. Imitate what your child does and says, and encourage them to imitate what you do and say. So imitation, language is all about imitation. And this is something that I think, it's interesting to think about how the organization of an environment can support learning and communication growth. But when the environment is organized, when things are grouped by category, it helps the child to group those things by category in their mind, which helps them associate things one with another, and it helps them to retrieve information because they're going to a category rather than a random file of information. reading to your child and looking at books and pictures together just for a few minutes every day. You know, you don't have to spend a long period of time with books unless that's something that you and your child enjoy doing together. You know, if that's something that's they are able to tolerate attention to books. But read to your child and look at books and pictures at least for a few minutes a day. And this starts from when they're first born throughout their life, because there's so much that they can learn and see, and so many things that can be reinforced by books and stories. And it's a special time between parents and children as well. Include songs and finger plays, music and dance into your daily routine. We learn a lot of language through music, and dance and rhythm helps to support our ability to sequence sounds. It builds memory. So many advantages of using songs and finger plays and music and dance. And art activities are also valuable to build vocabulary, turn taking, and support phrase use. There's so many different things that you could talk about during different art activities with your children. And consistency is really the key. Consistency is the key. Even when you feel like you just feel like a broken record, you just feel like you're just talking, you know, and I'm not suggesting that you talk constantly. It's really not just the quantity of what you say, but the quality of what you say and the consistency of what you say that will support your child's language development and learning. So there's lots of opportunities ahead to support your child's language development. And with the way you all answered those questions, I'm sure that you are doing many of these things already. Opportunities to enrich speech and language and communication are everywhere during feeding time, diapering, dressing, reading, art projects, music. They're everywhere. Whatever your child does, you can add language to it. Play is very valuable for building language. Community experiences, we've talked about that already, but just sharing information with your child when you're out and about in the community. It can be as simple as a walk around the block, a trip to the grocery store, going to the children's museum, the zoo, whatever. It doesn't have to be, and it could be digging in the dirt in the backyard, planting a seed. But just when you're out and about outside of your home, you know, again, these are excellent opportunities to build language. And technology, you know, can be great too. I love the iPad and different apps I use a lot in therapy, but, you know, I really would encourage you to make sure that your child is using the iPad as a tool rather than a toy, and that they're using it with you and as a learning experience rather than just entertainment. So in summary, you know, I would just encourage you to believe in yourself and believe in your child, work as a team with your child's speech and language pathologist, use some of these proven speech therapy strategies that I've shared with you at home, monitor your child's hearing, and enjoy the lifelong process of speech, language, and communication development, because we're all continuing to develop our communication skills. And, you know, I really believe this statement as a mom. I've lived this statement. The most important work you'll ever do will be within the walls of your own home. And I just would like to thank you for allowing me to be with you this evening. And this is information about how we can stay in touch. I'm the founder of Help Your Child to Talk. And we have courses, community coaching, and consultation for parents who want to know more about how they can help their child at home. So at this time, we can open it up for questions.
Number one, so helpful, Karen. That it's always good to hear all of this information. So I don't think you ever get too far on the journey to just be reminded. I know I saw one question for sure about ear tubes, or excuse me, I probably said the wrong thing, fluid on the ears. Maybe if there was a way to prevent ear infections. Did you want to speak to that? And I can add something in too.
Sure. Sometimes you can prevent ear infections and sometimes you can't. I mean, children can, if they're in daycare, they're susceptible to getting upper respiratory infections that can lead to ear infections. Sometimes children have allergies that can lead to ear infections. I think the way that I would suggest is the best way to handle it is for you to just be observant of your child. If you start to see changes in them, run them into the doctor and just get their ears checked. Children are going to get ear infections and some children are going to have repeated ear infections. The key is to stay on top of it, to monitor it, to not let it go too far, to have it treated so that the ear, because children can get ruptured eardrums with the fluid that builds up, it can get worse and worse. So just really to be aware of your child's behaviors and observe them. And if you suspect anything, even if you go in, twice and it's nothing, and you see it again a third time, still go, because you want to stay on top of it.
Yeah, I would also add the biggest thing I think that I've learned over the years with our kiddos is that they just have tiny little canals. So their ear canals, their little eye canals. And for us with Owen for a very long time, they just had a really tough time even seeing the eardrum. So we weren't even really ever sure what was going on. And we ended up doing ear tubes when he was about 9 months old, because we were actually that we were concerned about his hearing, and none of his hearing tests were coming back that he was having great hearing on either side. And so we were an ENT will definitely be one of your BFFs in the first few years, and having a really great relationship with an ENT, I think helps, especially one that understands just that you might have some additional things going on with this. And so tracking it, getting ears cleaned out more often and more frequently was really big for us with Owen. And then doing the tubes really helped. In fact, after we did some of these things and had his ears cleaned out really well, that was literally the day we were supposed to have him get hearing aids placed, because we were trying to figure out. And then it just he had enough growth in those ear canals, and getting everything cleaned out really helped. Should you find an ENT before there's an issue, or wait?
One more thing I wanted to say about ear infections, something that can lead to middle ear fluid is putting the baby to bed with a bottle. So if your child does use a bottle, make sure that they have completed their bottle before you lie them down, because that can, the fluid in the mouth can then drain into the ears, and that can build up an ear infection as well. So the ear canals are definitely tiny, and they're also flat. So as children grow, they angle, so they drain better. But with children with the diagnosis of Down syndrome, they tend to remain more flat over time. So, and you asked about if you should find an ENT before there is an issue. What you might want to do is just kind of network in your community and see who might be a potential good ENT for your child. And then when you need them, they're available. But usually the pediatrician wants to manage ear infections for the first few times. And then if it looks like it's going to be persistent, then they will refer you to an ENT.
And I can't remember off the top of my head on those new AAP guidelines. I know that visiting with an ENT is one of those checkpoints on there for one of your well child visits, and just starting to connect on that level. So we'll talk about that. I'll make sure I have that information for our next webinar too. But yeah, they really are one of those unsung heroes, I feel like, in our world. So any other questions popping in? I know some of this feels like it might be a long way away, depending on how old your child is, but speech, I feel like, is just something that most of us face in the community on some level of what kind of support your child needs in that area. Owen will be 10 this year, and speech is by far his biggest area where he's still developing. And, just listening to Karen say all of those things, I did feel like I was literally running narration for our lives for several years. And our child that's a little bit older than him also, he had apraxia. And so he wasn't talking much. And so I had like a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old that were basically just nonverbal most of the time. But now I can just see all of that work that we put in really coming through. And I just feel like we were putting all of this information into this box, and now it's all coming out. So it's really awesome.
Absolutely. You're planting those seeds.
I love it. And there's another question too, Karen, that I think you could probably speak to. Any apps that you might recommend for speech development?
Yes, that's a whole nother session. I love, depending upon the age of your child, some of my favorites. One I really like is called Starfall. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a membership app. So I think it's $39 a year, but it's excellent for preschoolers. I really like that. Yeah, Starfall. You I think that you can get some free components of it in the iTunes store. And then if you want to subscribe, you go to starfall.com for that. What particular area were you looking for apps for? I like Bitsboard. Bitsboard is good for building vocabulary as well as expressive language. Okay, so you're just early. I would say, music is going to be really key for littles. So you may want to download some apps that just have music, and the child doesn't need to look at the visual, just listen to the music would be good. But with a child so young, hands-on learning is really going to be most beneficial to them, talking to them, playing with them on the floor, using, little rattles and toys and nesting cups and blocks and stacking rings, all of those kinds of things to build that firsthand learning. And then the iPad is more of something that you can reinforce concepts with. Sure, yeah, that would be good. There's another one called Total Math that I like. That would be something maybe to come back and do a whole workshop where I could demonstrate some of the different apps for you, because there's just so many that are good for different things. There's one called Unite Books that's free, and it has a lot of little toddler book titles with actual pictures and then very simple text. The kids have loved that one, and I like it too. It's Unite Books, and that's in the iTunes store. Hamaguchi is another developer that has a lot of speech and language therapy apps. They have, let's see, I'm gonna just crank this up and look at some of the different ones that, Video Touch is another good one. Video Touch. And with Video Touch, I can show you the screen. You have different animals or musical instruments or vehicles, and you touch it, and then you actually see a little video. So that's great for talking. So there's so many out there. Oh yeah, Endless Reader, Endless Alphabet, Endless Numbers. I like those too. Yeah, I have those on here. Let's see.
I think the biggest thing that I learned with a lot of the apps and just books and things is just letting kids kind of explore and talk through and using that as a nice jumping off point to just get them talking, whether you're comparing things, talking about the colors, talking about what people are doing. And I know for some of you who have littler ones, I always loved to sit in and with speech therapy with Owen, because then I could see what they were doing and kind of take that modeling home. I think I wish I had an SLP that lived with me at home all the time, but then we realized pretty quickly that those skills just needed to transfer over to at home, and we just needed to keep using those same coaching and modeling things that he was seeing a couple of times a week with his speech therapist, and just really generalizing that across at home. So we were doing that all the time with him, and that was kind of a big light bulb moment for us. I mean, it took probably longer than it should have, that it wasn't him just going to speech and learning speech, it was how we really started to integrate it into our entire day and what that looked like.
Absolutely. And when you're working with your speech and language pathologist, let them know you want to be involved. Keep a little spiral notebook with questions that you can just jot down that you have for them, and participate in the sessions. It's so important that you see, because you can easily learn what we do. You can look, the strategies that I shared with you, those are all the strategies, that we use in therapy, and you can easily use those at home. Yeah, Duck Duck Moose has a lot of good apps too, like the Old MacDonald Had a Farm and the Itsy Bitsy Spider. There's one called Grandma's Preschool too that I like, that reinforces some different basic vocabulary and concepts that are related to preschool. But with the apps, just the important thing is to use the app with your child so that you can talk to them about it and really maximize what they're learning from it.
I think there's one more question in there. Maybe Karen, if you could address that, and then we probably wrap this up tonight since we're getting close to our hour, but how siblings can help with speech development.
I try to incorporate siblings into my session, and they can help because they're such good models. And also, I think participating in a speech therapy session, they can learn for the young, for the siblings who are also preschoolers or kindergarten, first graders. They just want to do so much, they're kind of they're in their little baby's brother or sister's face a little bit, and just to show them how to pull back and how to pace things. And okay, we're just going to work on this one word, and this is how we can do it. So just making them a part of it. And it's really interesting because I've had 3 siblings of children that I have worked with who have become speech and language pathologists. And I'm so honored by that. They would sit in on our sessions, and now they are speech and language pathologists as well. So 3, which is, I can't believe that number. It's really exciting, but just to, include them as much as possible, give them a role and a responsibility, really, praise them. Wow, you did such a great job. I love the way you taught them this, and just encourage them to be a part of the process. Because sometimes when, all the therapists are coming into the house and they're focusing on, the child that has, that is receiving therapy, the other siblings can feel a little bit left out. And so you want to incorporate them into those sessions and just really try to encourage and motivate them to be a big helper for their sibling.
Absolutely. Yeah. Agree. Especially having some kids close in age, that was just huge for us. And the older kids, they got into it too. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. It's early intervention is really designed for the family. So it's important to incorporate the family as much as possible.
Excellent.
Okay. Any more questions? Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to be with you. And
It has been wonderful for us to have you, Karen. I just, I know how important this is for our families and how much it comes up. So we love it. And I know that we started our online resource library not that long ago, and I just sent our team a message. I'm not sure if there's a section in there on some recommended apps, but I think that that could easily be something that we maybe add to and look at, because it is a question that comes up pretty commonly. I know we have a really great, robust section on book resources for families, but I don't know if we have anything for apps. So we'll check into that. And for those of you that are joining us, remember next week is our final parent webinar session. So we will have our DSDN, part of our medical outreach team, here to talk again about those health supervision guidelines and what is going on in that update and what kind of information you need to know about this, how this can be a really great tool to use with your medical providers and for yourself as you're just monitoring your child's development and growth. So Karen, thank you again so much. We appreciated this tonight, a wealth of knowledge and just exactly on point for what I think we needed to hear. So thank you a million for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Such an impressive group.
We have the best. That's
Yes,
all I know. We do.
I see that.